Hey, what's up, guys? You're listening to the It Takes a Village podcast. I'm Ashley, your host. This is where the struggles are real, the callings are heavy, the kids are sticky. We come together because it takes a village, and this is your tribe. Hey, what's up, guys? Happy Wednesday. If you are a mama to a kid who you can barely get them to eat anything remotely close to the shade green, this episode is for you. Today, I'm hanging out with Jennifer Scribner, and she is sharing all the deets on picky eating with our kids, how to combat it, how to make dinner time less stressful, less of a negative space. Like, the dinner table should not be something that they look back on as a negative experience. And also some symptoms that your kids may have that you may have not realized are related to food, or that food can impact these things, whether it be eczema or constipation, and really how to pay attention to the signs that maybe it is something that they're eating that's causing it. Okay, but before you go any further, stop right now, rate and review this podcast really quickly on iTunes. That would be super helpful. If you haven't already, make sure you go to theashcarroll.com and check out the blog, because I have some awesome gift guides for her live. I have some toy gift guides, so make sure you grab those, check them out. Hopefully they're helpful to you and make your shopping less stressful. But for now, let's get to this episode. Hey everyone, I am super excited to have Jennifer Scribner on the podcast today to talk about one of the things that we struggle with the most, or at least one of the top things, right, is like having our kids eat chicken nuggets and mac and cheese every single day because they think that green things are gross, or whatever. And so Jennifer, I'm really excited to have you on and talk about picky eating, your new book, and nutrition for our kids.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited too.
Yeah. So, okay, before we get started, I would love for you to give the audience an idea about who you are, what you do, and what life kind of looks like for you right now.
Sure. So I am a nutritional therapy practitioner and a GAPS diet practitioner, and that's how I came to work with kids and picky eating. Worked a lot with kids on the autism spectrum and sensory processing disorder, and also kids that have eczema and food allergies, and trying to get kids to eat a well-rounded diet that included vegetables and meats and, that type of stuff.
Right.
So that's kind of how I came to this work. Unlike probably your other guests, I don't have children of my own. So all of my experience of this really comes from working with others. My husband and I had suffered with infertility. And one day was actually my 40th birthday when we had kind of like put things on hold before we thought about it anymore. And I had this revelation. We were in Hawaii and I saw this really adorable family, and I was super jealous that I would never have that. And then I had this moment of clarity that this is what I have, and maybe that's not what I'm meant for. And I kept trying to be more perfect and be more worthy so that I would be blessed with children, and it just wasn't happening. And I had this moment of clarity where it was like, that's not your role. That's not what you're supposed to do, which was a shock, but also helped me relax into so many things about my life. And that's something I've really appreciated listening to your podcast and the diversity that you talk about within families, with parents and that are, single parents of, different persuasions. And I feel like because infertility is such a widespread issue now, we can't assume anymore that people who don't have kids don't like kids, and that we really do need to gather together and kind of be that village, because we all have these different places, and we're all in some way coming to terms with life didn't quite turn out the way we expected. I think we all have layers of that. Kids or not, I still have those revelations. My business hasn't turned out how I expected. My marriage isn't quite what I thought it would be, but these are all what they're meant to be,
Yeah. No, I'm told you can't see me, but this whole time I've been like nodding my head, like, yes, this is exactly like what everybody's experiencing. And I feel like it always comes back to that thing of like expectations that we put on ourselves, or like this idea of what is like quote unquote perfect. And then we like try to strive towards that. And then we're just like, but then when you take a step back, you're like, wait a minute, like, is this even like my life? Like, do I even really care about these things? Or am I like really putting it up there because I feel like it's what is supposed to happen? Or, or like, am I so focused on it that I'm forgetting about the things that I do have? Or the, like, for you, I feel like especially with this topic, like how many kids have you been able to work with and children that suffer with like allergies? And I'm a food allergy mom. So like if you listen to my podcast, I have Hashimoto's, and then my daughter, she has some digestion issues to where we have to watch what she eats, and it really affects her skin. And so like when you have the ability, like I don't have that gift. These are my own children and I don't have that gift. But if you have that ability, like, you know, like you're still helping so many children. It's just so awesome. And so I'm really glad that you are going to be able to tell me how to handle these situations, because, and so many other moms listening, because like I said, there's a lot of moms that are like, I cannot get my kids off the chicken nuggets, or I can't figure out why they're so constipated, or, you know, and we don't think that it's related. I'm like getting into all this stuff, but I have so many questions. So
great.
So speaking to those moms, you know, I wanted to ask you, some moms who can't get their kids to eat like spinach, but they eat all the other vegetables. Some moms would like claim their kid is picky because they don't eat like this one thing. But then you have other moms who, like I said, they have kids that are only eat 5 to 10 things on repeat, and they see that as picky. So I wanted to know, what is your version? Like, what is your opinion on what a true picky eater is?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's something that I think people are really unsure about. Like, what is a normal picky kid? What is normal picky eating? And it is typical to have kids go through a picky phase when they're 2 or 3, and they may be picky. It tends to change day by day. Like that's what you'll see is one day they may really be into spinach, and the next day they're like, don't put that near me. I'm going to throw a 3-hour tantrum if that's like on the plate. So they will rotate through different foods. That is natural, normal. And I think that speaks to kids being able to fulfill their own nutritional needs when they're eating a generally healthful, whole foods type of diet. Where that goes awry is when our kids get a lot of sugar, a lot of processed foods, and that can confuse the signaling in the brain, and it can get us kind of addicted to these different foods and food chemicals. And we will see that play out where there is that 5 to 10 foods, or they're picky and they won't eat a certain food group. So kids often won't eat vegetables, or they won't even eat meat. And, you know, maybe if it's a particular type of hot dog or a hamburger from McDonald's with, you know, nothing else on it. But often kids won't eat that kind of variety. And that's where we get into an issue. And when that goes further, when in a longitudinal study where they looked at kids that were, you know, from 2 to 12 years old, that was 40% of kids that became chronic picky eating, and there was that hyper selectivity. And that's where we get into nutritional deficiencies, where we start catching every cold that comes down the pike, where we will have things like eczema or issues with constipation, because the body runs on nutrients, and we start really limiting those nutrients when we get hyper picky like that.
Yeah. And I feel like we're kind of at this weird place in motherhood where we're either totally to the right side or totally to the left, where it's like, well, I don't want to force my kid to eat something that they don't like, or they're going to throw up at the table because I'm like choking it down their throat, you know, and then, but then you have the other side that's like, well, I'm going to put it on the table, and if you don't like it, you know, go to bed. And I feel like moms struggle with that, like finding the in-between balance of, okay, like I don't want to be extreme to where we make eating an issue, or, you know, I'm constantly pulling my hair out at dinner time, or, you know, I'm making 5 different meals for each child. Like, so how can we approach this in a non-stressful way, or is there a way to approach this in a non-stressful way?
It kind of depends on where you're starting from and how particularly picky your kid is, and how much you need that to change for their health or your sanity. And it is also normal to have preferences our whole life. I mean, I was a picky kid, but I was also a kid that had to sit at the table and take a bite of lima beans and or a bite of peas, and those were things that I just did not like, and I still don't like them. And I would gag on that. You know, that was a different thing, but I would eat other varieties of food. So some of that is preferences. And there's also the part where kids do need to just be open to trying things a number of times. So being able to set the tone where you're not so wrapped up in the result, as you are with, let's be open-minded, let's try new things, have that
Yeah.
bite or put it in your mouth. If you don't like it, you can spit it out, that's fine, but let's taste it again. Because with neurotypical kids, it's, 8 to 10, 12 times that they might taste something before they really know if they like it. And that can evolve as they get older. And then with kids who have, atypical development, that can be many more times if there's like sensory issues or something involved as well. So it really, sometimes if you really have that hyper picky kid and you really have to make a change, and that's kind of what my work was with people working on a therapeutic diet because their kids were, so unhealthy or so struggling, that we do have to say, all right, we know that this is going to be a fight, but this fight is going to last really a couple weeks max.
Yeah.
And we're going to give it our all, and we're going to rip that Band-Aid off, and we're going to make this change. And part of it is that your kids need to get used to the flavors and the textures and things, but also when we get nourished and we get that variety in, our brain starts responding better. We're getting the nutrients, we're getting rid of the toxicity that's within the brain and the body that can confuse this signaling. And so we start being more open to foods because of that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. For us, Daniel Tiger, I don't know if you've seen that show, but it's like a kid's show, and he sings about food, and it's like, try new foods because it might taste good. So if you're a parent listening, you need to get on your like iTunes music app or Spotify, and that song is on there, and so we'll listen to it, and it's totally, that was probably like the foundation of convincing our kids that they had to try new foods. But we have that rule of you have to take 2 bites at least before you can say you don't like it. And if you don't want to eat it, that's fine, but you have to like have at least 2 bites.
Yeah, not dislike things just on sight.
Right, yeah.
And that may be the case with a 2-year-old, but if your kid's 7 or 8, that can't fly anymore. There's more to it than that.
Yeah, really. Well, I think we've been using it that long, so even my 8-year-old, she hates like beans, but I'm like, or I'll try to cook it differently because I know she really has a dislike for beans, so I've made it like my mission. I'm like, I will make the best beans ever. Not that she necessarily needs to eat it. I'm just like, hey, like try it different ways and see if you like it better that way, or like that way I know. So I know not to cook it this way. Maybe you don't like it this way, but you like it this way.
That's an excellent point. And that was part of my pickiness growing up as well, is that, my mom was a working mom, a single mom for a while, and our foods were the boxes of frozen vegetables or the canned stuff. And so it was really mushy. It was really overcooked. And she was doing the best she could, but it wasn't until I was honestly like in my 30s that I started to have vegetables lightly cooked or made in other ways. And I was like, I actually do like Brussels sprouts. I just never had them steamed. I always had them super mushy, slimy, overcooked. And that was the issue.
You're like, wait a minute, this is what it really tastes like.
Yeah. Like, oh, if you steam it and it's like a little mini cabbage, it's kind of good.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And I'm not opposed to sneaking things in as well. So there are times where, you can blend an avocado into a smoothie, or you can make, beans into a flour that you bake into something to get more nutrition that way, and to get your kids kind of acclimated to something when they don't have to look at it the same way.
We just have those kids that just eat food, and that's how I was raised, and it just kind of overflowed into how they eat. But for other moms, I know that it's a legit battle for them, to even get their kiddos to try it. So is there any tips that, like verbiage that we should be using that encourage instead of like you have to, or like, at the dinner table?
Yeah. And I'm glad that you brought up you were raised that way and you feel like that's happened naturally, because as I've talked to some parents, they have told me that the dinner table was a very uncomfortable place for them. Maybe they had parents who fought, or there was a lot of food issues within them. And that was something that they needed to overcome themselves and kind of think about that programming that they got and how they wanted to write a new story for their own family. So if that was something that was a struggle for a mom that's listening, really think about how that's influencing you now and what you really want to be demonstrating for your own kids.
Yeah.
And I really like approaching things with openness and curiosity and experimentation. getting the kids involved in, picking a new kind of vegetable or maybe growing something or
Yeah.
helping you chop something or put something down the food processor. Because when they have some bit of ownership in that, they're more likely to be open to tasting that as well. And there are some circumstances where, working with kids on the autism spectrum where we've just said cold turkey, these are the foods you're eating, everything else is gone. You're not going to starve to death. We're going to keep you hydrated.
Yeah.
You can cry about it, and they will fast for sometimes 3 days, 5 days, where we just keep them hydrated and we keep offering these foods. And at some point they will realize this is the way it's going to be, and they will try something. Often it's when they see you eating something calmly that's not offered to them. So just keep trying different strategies that way. And the most important thing is that you have your mindset right and that you are confident and comfortable in the choices that you're making. And it's kind of like, this is the rules. I'm here to enforce them, but it's not personal to me.
Yeah.
So maybe you're serving food family style and they can, choose a bite of everything, but they're eating whatever is on the table and they may not eat for a meal and they're not going to starve to death. That's something I know moms worry about a lot. Like, oh, my kid's going to go, hungry tonight or going to be hungry at school tomorrow. Some kids need to know that boundary. Some kids need to know that you're serious about that, but you're not going to get emotional about it. That's where they'll kind of like play on your heartstrings. Or if you and, your spouse aren't in agreement on this and they think they could get a treat from them or from grandma, like, we kids, and, we like to manipulate those things the way that we can to get what we want and realize that sometimes that's not your kids, especially if your kid has a lot of digestive issues, a lot of, or any type of chronic illness, that may very well be their imbalanced gut microbes that are driving that behavior. It's not really them. It is their microbes screaming for sugar and causing this fixation on certain foods and this, hangriness and these tantrums when they don't get it. And that will pass.
Yeah. So I'm really interested in that because in your book you mentioned, like eczema, bedwetting, and constipation, and those being factors or possible factors of like how our kids eat. And so how do we know? Is there a way of knowing like, hey, maybe I need to look at this deeper, or maybe I really need to take a look at their diet because of these issues?
Well, I'm a nutritional therapist, so I see everything through those lenses. So I feel like it's applicable to everything that we have in life. But particularly with things like eczema, a lot of that can be food driven, where it's a specific food sensitivity. So maybe you want to, leave something out for a while or do an elimination diet. With eczema, it can also be a toxicity buildup. So you might look at, okay, what food chemicals are we eating? Are we eating things that are artificial colors or have, other fake things we can't pronounce or wouldn't have in our kitchen? If we cut back or cut down on those things, does that make a difference? If we change what we are cleaning our home with, if we do all non-toxic, laundry, soaps, and body care products, that can make a huge difference, because sometimes both with constipation and eczema, they can show up as an overburden of toxicity in the body. And if the liver can't process through the things that are coming in efficiently, stuff will show up through the skin more readily. And that can also lead to constipation. Constipation can be a tricky one because sometimes it's based on a single food, like dairy. Sometimes it can be grains, which we tend to think as fibrous and really helpful. But some kids, when we pull grains from the diet and really focus on the other veggie fibers, that is really the trick to overcoming it. So it's that detective work that we're always kind of doing as parents that we have to really monitor, try switching something out for a couple weeks, maybe, like, okay, we're not going to do yogurt for 2 weeks. That seems like something that should be helpful to the gut, but maybe it's not working for my kids. We take dairy out for 2 weeks. So being willing to play with that a little bit and kind of getting out of your own comfort zone of sameness as well, and making some different food plans.
Yeah, definitely. That's one thing that I was surprised, and it was hard for me to wrap my mind around, is how much of an impact your gut really has on your overall health. Do you have a way that you speak to the parents that you work with to explain like how there's a connection in a way that's easy for them to understand?
Yeah, so through the GAPS diet, that's what I have specialized in, which is gut and psychology syndrome. So that's kind of the foundation of what I work with on people, is how the gut is connected to the brain, how the gut is connected to the rest of the body. That it was, again, in my 30s when I really internalized, you are what you eat isn't just a cute saying. Like, that is really it.
Yeah.
Everything our structure is made out of is what we eat and what we digest. And so that is crucial to just the foundation of everything else within the body. And so when we look at things like, mood and anxiety and that kind of stuff that's so prevalent with kids, well, 90% of our neurotransmitters are made and housed in our gut. So if we have any kind of gut issues, or if we have a brain issue, we might not be, or mood issue, it might not show up as a digestive issue, but that can still be the root of it. That was my thing, where I had really, bad acne into my 30s. And that was what prompted me to get back in studying nutrition. And I never had digestive problems. That wasn't like my constitutional weakness. But when I worked on my gut and started, eating better, taking probiotics, having fermented foods, doing the bone broths, the things that are really common across a lot of gut healing diets, my skin started improving. So there was a root of something, even though it wasn't so obvious.
Yeah.
So it really is just so foundational, and you can definitely go down the rabbit hole learning about that online if you'd like. And I talk about that within my book as well, kind of how you got a picky kid. To me, I talk about those physiological reasons, because most people feel like it's a will thing or a personality thing, and it's not. Typically, it really is something that's physiologically driven, and it's important for people to understand that.
That would be so helpful for a lot of moms, I'm sure, because, you're fighting against what you think is one thing, but if you're actually not addressing that, it's a psychological issue, or it's, like you said, how something's going on in their gut and it's causing behavioral issues, and then you're just like fighting. It's like going against a wall that we can't figure out why we can't break through, and then we feel bad because we're doing a bad job, or we're yelling all the time, or we can't get our kids to eat, and so oh man, I feel like that would just open so many doors to where it'd be like, I don't know, like so many moms would be like, thank you. But
and many of us have experienced something like that ourselves, where we're kind of controlled by our microbes. For me, I was, have been a huge sugar addict and really into chocolate. And there would be times when I would be eating that.
Yeah.
Beyond the point that it was enjoyable to me, knowing that I really didn't want to do it anymore. Like, I want to stop, but I just can't stop until it's all gone.
Yeah.
That wasn't me. That was my microbes. Like, keep it coming. And I would get in this sort of, this endorphin rush that we get from eating sugars. And that was the cycle that I was kept in, looking for the pleasure and the food for my microbes. And it was like, I was outside of myself doing that. And I feel like a lot of us have that type of experience with, sugar or other foods that we kind of use that way for pleasure. And then we feel bad and shameful about ourselves when that's not really a personality or willpower issue.
Yeah. And you talked about, I wanted to bring this up just for other moms who have children with autism or they're on the spectrum, because I feel like maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like maybe there has to be a different approach to them, or like sensory issues. Because I feel like if my child had sensory issues and it was like broccoli I was trying to get them to eat, or something that, was triggering them, I would approach it differently than I would, my other child who didn't have those issues. Is that something that you do suggest, or is it pretty much the same despite the differences?
More often with kids who have that severe type of picky eating with sensory issues, I will have the family do a cold turkey, where we just say, this is the variety of foods you're eating now, and all the rest are gone, because it's so hard to back into it and try to get them to take a bite of something healthy. If they have other options, they just won't be able to overcome that.
Yeah.
And with sensory issues, you have to combine the foods you're introducing with your kids' preferences and work through that. So if your kid will only eat things in a, smoothie type texture, what other things can you build into that smoothie? If your kids won't drink liquids, then what can we do to bring something like a broth or a juice or something in another way?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how can we make everything crunchier? Or can we,
Yeah.
stick everything in a meatball? Like, we got to work within those preferences at first to round out that nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
And then there can be specific sensory steps depending on the kid that you need to take where it is, okay, well, we're not eating the food right now, but we're putting it on your plate.
Yeah.
But you don't have to eat it. You have to see it. And then we're going to put it on a, Q-tip, and we're going to smell it. We're going to touch it to your lips. We're going to take a bite. We're going to spit it out. So
That's
you can
awesome,
work
yeah.
with different, with those steps yourself or with a feeding therapist on those type of things. And those sensory issues can really vary with kids. So you kind of have to take that approach. And in the back of my book, I actually have a section called My Child Won't, which is my child won't drink broth. My child won't drink water. My child won't eat, crunchy textures. My child doesn't have meat. How can I work in these other foods to get a well-rounded diet when my kid won't do this particular thing that I think is so important or is part of a healing diet that we're implementing?
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Also, I wanted to ask you, as you were talking about this, I was thinking about how I wonder, since you work with, the parents and the children, out of my curiosity, I wonder who do you feel like has the harder time, like struggling through introducing new foods, the child or the parent?
The parent.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, and that's why towards the beginning of my book, I have a section on mindset, and that is where we start. And really gathering your support, getting people on the same page, making your plan. So when you do make this change, especially if it needs to be a dramatic change because you're dealing with a severe picky kid, that you start this once and you complete it. That you don't want to be in that stage where you try it for a day and you're totally broken down and crying at the end of the day, and you're so worried that you go back to the old way of eating, because then your kids do learn that they've kind of won that battle, and they will put up more of a fight that next time.
Yeah.
So I want people to start out on the right foot, to have support, to know that, and I've said with my clients, and with other people, like, have someone you could call crying at the end of the day who really gets what you're doing and can support you through that. And if you have people in your life who think it's torture to not give your kids cookies, or think that you're a child abuser and kids are kids and they should be able to eat whatever they want, you might need to leave those people out for a couple weeks while you're working on this, because they're the ones who are going to be like, oh, it doesn't matter, just quit. But when you know in your heart that this is the type of change that is going to lead to better health and better happiness in your kid, gather that support around you so that you have the resilience. And then I also encourage, both parents to have some self-care every day, to make a plan for that as well. That it is really, especially when you're cutting the kids off cold turkey and you're at your wit's end, like, you need to be able to go for a walk around the block by yourself, or, do something that gives you that mental break so that you can fill back up and kind of take the next round as it comes.
Yeah. It reminds me of kind of like potty training. It's like, we're going to stay in for the weekend. Nobody's going to talk to us. Nobody, we're never leaving the house right now. But so that you bring up a good point though, of needing that support. And I know that this is such a touchy thing because, that means we have to talk to grandparents because our kids go to the grandparents' house a lot, or that means we have to talk to mother-in-laws and father-in-laws. How do you guide parents on like how to talk to those people without offending them, or without but letting them know like, hey, I'm serious and like I need your help on this?
Yeah. And the most important part is that you feel really confident and comfortable in your own decision, and that you're really sure that this is the right thing to do before you approach that conversation. Because other people, if they feel like you might be wishy-washy, they will kind of bring you around to their way of thinking. And the thing to realize, this is the biggest thing for me, is that when I became confident and comfortable, the people around me were so much more likely to respect my decisions and not take them personal. Because that's what's happening so much with our parents and with other family, is that they feel like you're rejecting them.
Yeah.
Your kids can't eat the Christmas cookies we've always made. We've had this tradition of eating, or all the cousins are together. Why can't your kid have this ice cream? They're going to be left out of the family togetherness. So we need to make sure that we're explaining our why, that it's an experiment, that we really need them to come along with us on this and to see what the difference is, that it doesn't necessarily have to be forever, but it is for right now, and that it's not a judgment against them. And it's hard when you do change your own eating, you feel better, you get up on a soapbox and you think everyone should do it.
Yeah. We've all
Bring
seen
yourself
the Facebook
to a
posts.
place of no judgment
Yeah.
of them as well.
Yeah.
And that's something that can be challenging for ourselves because we want to praise the gospels of what we're learning.
Yep. Yeah.
But to really be like, hey, this is what we're doing. We're going to provide our own food and it's nothing against you. You do what you want. We're happy with our choices. You're happy with your choices. So having that mindset where you need them supporting you, but you don't need them to fundamentally change, because that's often what we want when we're changing, is we want other people to do the same thing as us because that's validating, but we need to be comfortable enough to be different and be comfortable and confident for our family alone.
Yeah. And for parents listening, this is something that I've had to deal with, showing up to, especially with children, like showing up to birthday parties, you feel like, oh, well, like I can't take them then because they can't eat the cake or the ice cream or the pizza or whatever. But
I have a blog article specifically about that issue.
Yeah. So I haven't read it yet, but I'm gonna have to do that. Like, I am the mom that shows up with, if I know that there's gonna be pizza, I have an alternative. If I know there's gonna be cake or whatever, because my daughter can't eat gluten. Just wanted to encourage other moms that, like, you can do it, and like you said, you just have to be confident in your choice, and like nobody really cares. I don't think that anybody like really cares. They'd be like, oh my gosh, she's not eating our pizza.
Yeah, most of us are so concerned about ourselves and realize the people on the other side are too.
Yeah.
So, and what you said, talking with your kids, as is appropriate for their developmental level,
right.
Like that's exactly what I recommend. Like, how can we internalize? How can we help them understand how it makes them feel? Because kids do have, anxiety. So if we don't have the artificial colors in the diet and we don't have as much anxiety when we're with our friends, then it's easier to make those choices when our parents aren't around.
Yeah.
So bringing that type of discussion in is really useful because we don't want to police our kids eating all the time. We really want to be able to help them understand how it makes them feel and why they're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people who are really excited about supporting you and making things a different way. We can't have that expectation, but there are more and more people who are interested in that because the talk about food allergies in particular is so much more common in our culture right now. And these things and all these type of childhood issues with asthma and eczema, they're so widespread that more people are open to this and coming around to that idea that they can be different, or maybe they need your example to try something new themselves. So just stay open. That's what I feel like. Stay open to these conversations and not taking things personally. If people do ask you questions, it's not always an attack. It can be a curiosity. And sometimes when we're self-conscious about it, we'll perceive it differently than it was meant.
Yeah, totally. Yes, I completely agree. So for everybody listening, your book is From Mac and Cheese to Veggies, Please, which is like the cutest title ever. I love that. And everybody can find that on Amazon.
Yes, it's on Amazon. If you're local to where I am in Portland, Oregon, it's at the Barnes & Nobles here as well.
Awesome. If they need to find you, where can they find you?
My website is bodywisdomnutrition.com, and that's the best place to find me. I'm also on the socials, but that's the simplest way.
Yeah.
And I have a whole section, a tab on there for parents that will talk about the book and this work as well.
Awesome. Okay, so my first question is, if you could choose one of the most influential books that you've read or podcasts or anything like that, what would it be?
Something that's had a really big influence on me in the past couple of years is a book called When the Body Says No by Dr. Gabor Mate. And it's looking at the research behind autoimmunity and serious illnesses and the emotional repression that can be behind some of those, and the types of times where we may not even be conscious of the patterns that we're in and the things that we're agreeing to or going along with that we don't really want to be doing, and how our body can be what gets us out of it, can make us stop, can get sick enough to where we don't have to participate in those things. And so I'm very curious about those under the surface patterns and how we can bring those up for ourselves and heal those emotional things so that we can have healthier bodies as well.
Yeah. It's been so amazing, like how this whole idea of like listening to your body is not just some like woo woo thing to say, but it's actually been for us like super beneficial because it's so interesting, like just how much your body can actually tell you if we just actually pay attention.
And I was completely out of touch with that my entire life until I went back to nutrition school. And even when I did the first physical testing, my body didn't respond to things quickly at all because I was so disconnected and I was only eating food based on the dogma, not how it made me feel. The ways I thought about my body were how much I didn't like it. You know, how much I judged it and felt shameful about, you know, being a woman and being curvy and not having the right thighs and all those things. So I didn't have any internalization until much later.
That could be like a whole nother episode about like body, like food, or the way we relate to food on a like emotional level and how we, oh my gosh. Anyways. Moving on to the next question. What is your favorite form of self-care, or what do you do that fills you up the most?
And this is kind of related to that last question because for me, it's yoga. And I've practiced yoga off and on for, 20 years, but it wasn't until much more recently that I started a home practice. I didn't feel like I had time to do anything out of the house. And so I'm like, okay, I have 15 to 30 minutes a day where I can, do this in my pajamas, no special clothes needed. And practicing that way makes my body feel good. I feel more comfortable. I don't have the aches and I feel stronger and I feel more like I'm in my body and I feel better about the way my body looks because I feel better about the way my body functions, even though I still struggle with, my looks. But it's brought me back into appreciating my body for the way it feels and all the things it does for me and how capable and able-bodied I am. And that has been really important for me.
Do you watch a YouTube channel to go along with, or do you have like an app that you use, or is your yoga practice something that you just come up with on your own?
No, I don't come up with it on my own. I do yoga with Adrienne on YouTube.
Oh, okay. I've watched that one also. So, but I know other people, like they love to hear what other people are using, to guide them through exercises. So,
she has a 30-day challenge I heard about from a friend, and that's what I started with. And I used to be an over-exerciser, so I don't follow things strictly 30 days. I try to have some leeway in honoring the days I need to not do things. But I, did the 30 days and maybe 35 days or so, and I just felt so good that I wanted to continue it. And so she's had a channel for, 7-8 years with tons of videos. So there's all something that you can follow along with at different levels. And her approach is really about feeling good and doing what works for you rather than trying to get to the pose, but being present with how it feels. And I think that's what resonated with me because in the past I was doing hot yoga and I was really needing to like kick my own butt and exercise yoga. And that wasn't healthy for me psychologically. And it wasn't the healthiest thing for my body either. I was overstretching and inflaming my body.
The last question is, if you could empower women in one way, what would it be?
One of the most empowering things for me over the past few years has been the ability to say, let me think about that and get back to you. As someone who would automatically say yes or feel like I needed to agree to a lot of things, that's given me, and I'm not a quick on my feet thinker at all times. So being able to say, let me think it over, get back to you, gives me a moment to go home, process, make sure this is something I really have the capacity to do, really want to do. Partly because I want to do things with joy, not resentment. And I noticed myself doing a lot of things resentfully, and that wasn't a spirit that I wanted to be spreading around. So being able to take that little pause for myself has really suited me and the relationships that I'm, nurturing and the things I am agreeing to. And so that is something I think can help a lot of people to break our automatic patterns and to really agree to the things that we want to do and do that more joyfully.